Imagine a predator who terrorized entire neighborhoods for more than a decade, breaking into homes, attacking couples in the dead of night, leaving communities shattered and investigators baffled. For more than 30 years, he was a ghost. Then, in 2018, a quiet revolution in consumer DNA and old-fashioned genealogy closed the circle. This is the story of the Golden State Killer, and how an internet hobby cracked one of America's coldest cases. Stay with me, because in the next 20 minutes we'll follow detectives from dusty evidence bins to online family trees, explain the exact genetic trick that pointed to a suspect, show how police confirmed him, and unpack the controversy that followed. Hit like and subscribe if you want deep true crime that explains the how as well as the horror. In the 1970s and 1980s, California was terrorized by a string of related crimes under several names. The Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker, names given by press and police to patterns of burglaries, rapes, and murders. Victims were attacked late at night, sometimes with the suspect tying them, sometimes with brutal escalation. The physical evidence left behind, semen, hairs, fingerprints, created an incomplete trail that for decades produced no arrest. By the 1990s and 2000s, investigators had linked many of the crimes by DNA. They knew the same person committed attacks across regions, but the suspect remained unknown. Conventional databases and tips failed. Families who once feared the nights started living with an open wound. Investigators kept the case alive, building timelines, retesting old evidence as technology improved. In the 2010s, millions of people used consumer DNA services to explore ancestry. Some of those users uploaded raw DNA data to public genealogy sites to find relatives. Investigators realized if a criminal's unknown DNA profile could be turned into a searchable ancestry profile, it might match relatives in those public databases, distant cousins who could point the way. This approach is called forensic genetic genealogy. Here's the core trick. Forensic genealogists convert crime scene DNA into a format comparable with consumer DNA files. They upload that profile to genealogy databases that allow law enforcement or publicly uploaded kits and search for partial matches. People who share measurable chunks of DNA, indicating they are like second, third, or fourth cousins. From those distant cousins, genealogists use traditional records, birth certificates, obituaries, census data, to build a family tree that can narrow possibilities down to a handful of individuals. In 2018, investigators uploaded the crime scene genetic profile to a public genealogy database and found matches to distant relatives. That allowed them to construct a family tree and step by step, using addresses, ages, and other records, they narrowed it down to one likely candidate, a man who lived in the right places at the right times. Investigators then quietly surveilled him and collected his DNA surreptitiously from a discarded tissue and items he touched, and matched it to evidence from multiple crime scenes. That match led to the arrest in April 2018. On April 24, 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, was arrested at his home. Detectives believed they had their man because his discarded DNA matched samples taken from crime scenes decades earlier. Prosecutors later charged him with multiple counts of murder and other crimes. The DNA link was the forensic linchpin. DeAngelo's arrest eventually led to prosecutions in different counties. Rather than face multiple death penalty trials, DeAngelo accepted a plea deal. He pled guilty to numerous counts in exchange for life sentences without parole. The court records, testimonies, and the guilty plea brought closure, but also raised new questions about how the arrest was achieved. The Golden State Killer case became a watershed because it showed, in dramatic fashion, that consumer genetics could solve cold cases other methods could not. Almost overnight, law enforcement agencies across the U.S. began exploring forensic genealogy. True crime programs and lawmakers took notice. Genealogists, hobbyists, and the public realized their online family trees could have real-world legal consequences. But it wasn't all celebration. Privacy advocates, ethicists, and some users cried foul. People who put their DNA online for family history didn't expect law enforcement to use it. Questions proliferated. Do people implicitly consent when their distant cousin's data is in a public database? Should law enforcement need a warrant? What about false leads and the risk of misidentification? From a science standpoint, genetic genealogy is powerful but not infallible. DNA segment matches give probabilities. They point to relatives, not individuals. Investigators must triangulate with records, timelines, and traditional detective work. Forensic DNA matching to the crime scene sample is the final scientific confirmation. But the genealogical method is the lead generator, not the sole proof. After the arrests and fallout, many genealogy platforms updated policies. Some restricted law enforcement access. Others allowed it only under strict conditions. Big consumer companies like Ancestry and 23andMe publicly clarified they did not participate in the police searches that led to DeAngelo. Smaller public sites that host user-uploaded raw data became the focal point for debate and reform. Since the Golden State Killer, forensic genealogy has helped solve dozens of cold cases, murders, rapes, even some violent burglaries. But it's not a panacea. It depends on relatives being in public databases and on sleuthing resources. The technique tends to work better in countries with high consumer DNA uptake and accessible civil records. Above all, this is a human story. Families got answers. Survivors saw a perpetrator held accountable. But remembering victims and their trauma is essential. Solving a case can't erase what happened. Some survivors and victim advocates welcomed the arrests. Others felt justice arrived too late. The Golden State Killer case sits at the crossroads of technology, justice, privacy, and family history. It showed the power of new tools and reminded us we need rules to govern them. If you found this deep dive useful, subscribe and ring the bell. Tell us in the comments, do you think forensic genealogy should be allowed, and under what rules? I'll read the best arguments in our next episode.